this workshop is basically on addressing a lot of the challenges that we have day to day, and really not reinventing the wheel. One of the things we've noticed in so many of the classes is that in a lot of ways where we keep trying to like reinvent the wheel a little bit, and so much of what we have and our stories as a people and our Torah really give us tools that are incredible for life. So, you know that I've been on campus now for, 13 years. We're starting our 14th year on campus. And I felt so much of our time is spent not just, teaching a Torah class or delivering a matzo ball soup, or I don't know, creating a program, social program, a barbecue. So much of our time has been really nurturing and caring for students emotionally and being a guide and a friend in their mental health journey. And we've seen so much between the ER visits and the crisis phone calls from parents across the country at 1 a.m. saying, help, my child's in crisis, finding a local therapist to send people to, and leading us even to creating, Sarah's been very involved in our whole mental health initiative on campus. And we're going to actually in the fall be doing an online safe talk workshop for students and whoever else is interested. It's a 1-hour workshop and it's really like very, very practical. So that's all to meet a need, but there's so much that I've heard. And I know that I remember 2 summers ago, before we launched our initiative, I heard this, I was driving and I heard the statistics that 70% of American college-age kids are on antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds. And I remember that number was like really jarring. It like hit me. I always knew that students were contending with and dealing with really difficult issues. I knew that people were struggling. I knew because we got those phone calls and we made those 1 a.m., chocolate deliveries to sit and talk with someone who just had a really rough breakup. Like we were going through all the steps, but to step out and hear from a statistical place was like really, really jarring. So I knew we had to do something, but the truth is, like, I'm not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist, and like, what can I do about it, right? But yet I know as a Lubavitcher Chassid, the Lubavitcher Rebbe always said, if you see something that's wrong with the world, it's God's way, it's Hashem's way of showing you a part of the world that you need to be involved in repairing. Like if you see it, like see something, say something, that slogan you see in New York on the subways or whatever, like if you see something, there's a reason you're seeing it. It's not a mistake. So I felt like we gotta address it. So obviously on some level, we can really try to understand the causes of all of this. And, I've asked students, what do you think are the causes? And I would love to hear from you. What do you think some of the causes of what's going on, in society with our youth, all this layers that they're struggling with? Any thoughts?
I think one of the problems is just that the expectations in our world has changed. And I'm seeing it as far down as kindergarten. Kids getting into kindergarten, what the expectations are just to even get there. So as it's trickling up as opposed to trickling down, and it's rolling upwards. Kids going into college, and in college, their requirements have changed, and the expectations, I think, have changed. I also think that worries of what will be available to them as jobs has changed. And trying to figure out who they are in this world, and trying to find courses that will fit into a job that they can have once they get out has changed. And it's very stressful. That's my opinion. I think it is.
Yeah. I agree with you completely, because even the pressure to get the right internship early enough, because there's so many more people going to college, there's so much more competition. So as much as it's such a robust market with, great, at the end of the day, there's a lot more competition. You're showing up at the gate with a lot more to prove yourself and why you're worth it. So I agree with you completely. Yeah. Expectations, but I would also add that also societal expectations.
Right.
Meaning, I remember when I taught preschool, a mom saying, so how many hours should I be reviewing? This is a 2-year-old. How many hours should I be doing like flashcards and reviewing? I'm like, 0. What do you mean 0? What will I do? How will he read? He's 2. Let him play in the mud. Let him learn from the environment. Like there's also this very product-oriented education system that has so much immense pressure, right? And so that's for sure a layer. And I love that you mentioned it. Even the forward-thinking jobs. I remember a girl once, she was so passionate about education, and her parents said to her, that's not a job that you're going to make money. So she was in the business school, 5 years in the business school. And guess what? She gets out, she goes into whatever accounting, she's miserable. She ends up going back to school as a teacher for a master's because that's where her passion was. So this whole like, get a job that brings X amount of money. And guess what? Guess what she is now? Thank God she used her education major. She's a stay-at-home mom to 2 beautiful children, and she's nurturing and raising the next generation of humans. I'm going to mute you for a second because there's a lot of background buzz, if that's okay. Okay, sorry. That's okay. The other thing is, Sarah, do you think there's any other factors that you would jump in and share?
Yes. I think that it goes back beyond, one step beyond the expectations. I mean, the expectations are because, as you said, there's so much competition. And the competition is all about economically, socioeconomically, families need to have 2 working parents for the most part these days. They don't have time for each other, for themselves, for the kids. Nobody has time.
Yeah.
So starting from like the generation before, the parents of these kids are at a loss for how to have been there for them from when they were little. And all they knew how to do was go along with what, okay, so they're supposed to read at the age of 5, all right, tell me what to do, I'll teach them how to read. I can't because I don't have time anyway. And so nobody knows what they're doing.
I would add to it, I love what you brought in about family as well, because I think the family structure and family unit is so important to the nurturing, healthy adjustment and well-being of a child. And we're all so fragmented as human beings. Social media is pulling us, the news is pulling us, our phones are distracting us. You know, I was talking to my friend, she says, I can't imagine being a child being raised by parents who had cell phones, smartphones. And it hit me and I was like, whoa. And you know what? I started in the morning when I wake up and I come out to spend, let's say an hour or 2 with the kids before we're running, I leave my phone in my room. Or if I'm trying to be more conscious of it because it was such a jarring statement. Like, yeah, now that's for me as a parent and as an adult. And technology, the addictive factors of cell phones, we could have a whole discussion on that, right? But how about to our young kids, social media, filters, Instagram, everyone's life looks great. Instagram filters, you don't even have to lose weight. You just have to hold your camera at the right end with the right background. You don't even have to be on vacation in Bali. Everyone could think you are and be jealous of you. Meanwhile, you're crumbled up in the couch, rolled in potato chips, in your pajamas, but everyone thinks you just had a vacation to the Greek Isles, right? So the also expectations, family, the measuring stick of what people hold their life should be, would be, could be at this time, right? These kids are thinking everyone else has their internship, their vacation, their boyfriend. There's a 15-second glimpse, right? That's how quick Instagram posts are, 15 seconds. Snapchat even quicker. So you're getting a highlight reel, not even a trailer. A trailer's 1.5 minutes. You're getting a glimpse into 5 seconds of someone's life, and you're saying, oh, my life doesn't equal that. And that's maybe not so much for, let's say, our generation, but for sure on the college level, this is a huge factor, and there's just a lot of pressure, okay? So moving on, a lot of this we knew intuitively because of what we were dealing with. Moving on, once Sophie passed away, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, so Sophie, one of the girls who was very much a part of the Chabad family, an intern, taught my kids daily. She had a tragic accident. Her and her mother passed away. And it really spiraled a lot of our students into a very dark place because this was the first time they knew someone who passed away. It was so sudden. It was a friend. It was someone, there was a very conscious void. Everyone knows people die in accidents, but not their friend, right? And there were people who were at the festival with her at ACL. They were like, it could have been me. It was a really, really massive crisis. So Yossi and I knew, like, we got to do something serious. Like, we can't just like like warm chicken soup and like whatever. We knew we had to take a different look at it. And from that darkness was born our mental health initiative on campus, which Rejuvenation. And Sara, you've been, again, instrumental in really giving us the professional, you're a professional, you're a doctor, this is your field. We have our perspective, and you come to it with all your years of education and your wisdom that you share, and that you continue to share with all of us. So, but what I really wanted to do is, because my perspective is Torah always, right? That's always kind of the lens I see things through, or I try to see things through, right? So I was like, one day it hit me. I'm like, we are not the first generation to deal with issues. Like, everyone feels so sorry for us, and we feel sorry for ourselves. And this is pre-pandemic, right? We still felt sorry for ourselves. And look at our history as a people, riddled with tragedies, riddled with catastrophe. Every single one of our holidays is centered around, we were victims, they tried to get us. Oh, guess what? We're alive. Now let's find a good dish to make. Like, it's kind of a recurring theme with us. On our holidays, what do? We sit at a Seder, we eat matzah that reminds us of affliction. We dip herbs that are bitter in salt water that reminds us of tears. And so I was like, okay, are we just obsessed with misery? Like, what's our story? Because as Jews, we're not. We commemorate, we acknowledge, we recognize, but actually we move forward and we take that energy forward into our lives. We don't stop in a victim mentality. It's not the Jewish way, right? The Jewish way is not to just be obsessed with trauma. The Jewish way is to learn from the negativity. Fascinatingly enough, today's Tu B'Av, known as the Jewish Valentine's Day or Jewish Day of Love. And Tu B'Av comes like directly after Tisha B'Av, the darkest day on the Jewish calendar, leading to the most joyous, a day that was about couplehood and love. And the Gemara describes, you have to bake it. Okay. The Gemara describes how we're meant to, that this was a day where matches were made, and it's a day to celebrate new lives being formed. And it was a full-on holiday and celebration. What's incredible is that darkness, and suddenly say, this is just hop, skip, jump right away to this full moon, to this brightness, to this light, to this joy. Yeah, that's the Jewish way. We'll acknowledge the dark moments, but we pull that energy in, and as dark as the dark is, it's darkest before the dawn. So that's actually a Jewish perspective. So the way I formed this course, that's actually all kind of an introduction, but the way I actually formed this course is I would like to look at people in our Torah, because we all know, as we've discussed in the past, that the Torah is not a history book. We said if it was, it would be a lousy history book. Name, dates, chronology, mixed out. We meet Abraham when he's in his 70s, like what happened beforehand, if he's our founding father, like where do we know all this stuff? Midrash. So we know it's not a history book. And we know, we said often, that it's a teacher and a guide. So the stories that are documented, the lives that are retold, the characters that we revisit annually to learn from their story, each one faced tremendous challenges. But when we look at who they were, what were their challenges, and how they transformed that reality into light, I feel like we could bring some of that light into our lives. We know that the Torah is called Torah Chaim, a living Torah. It's called, we say it's Eitz Chaim Hi, it's a living, vibrant Torah. It's a tree of life, right? So
I think what you're saying, there's a very obvious point that has kind of surprisingly struck me as like a new thing recently. And it's that, and certainly the people in college, the young people, are aware that there's this big thing about Black history, about heritage, about all that, and that I don't think there's enough of an emphasis on that, a clarity about that. You've got, it's what we were saying, you grew up in chaos right now. I mean, your parents didn't know what to do for most of these people. The schools didn't know what to do. We don't know what's coming in the future. But you have a long history of heritage that really belongs to you.
Wow. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to actually put that in. This is why I'm so glad you're joining me for this, both of you, because you're adding so many layers to this, and I appreciate it. I think, we refer to it as we're on giants' shoulders. If you show up at a fence and a wall and you can't see over it, That's the analogy, the mashal, the analogy given, and mashal given is if you jump on the shoulder of a giant, you can see. Because we could say, okay, like, how are we going to ever get through this? Well, we have a history, we have a heritage, and I love what you said. It belongs to us. Like, I try to get this message across to students. It is your Torah. It's your forefather, not mine. Oh, you're a Rebbitzin, so you have a connection to Miriam and Abraham. No, you, not me. So all of us, and I agree with you so much that when we take a dive in and we can look at it and say, well, why did God want us in 2020 to be reading the story of Abraham? Like, is it relevant? Did it expire? Like, why?
Yeah, I think that's the big difference. And I grew up learning all this stuff.
Right.
And I heard those words, this is your heritage, of course. But I never made the connection between, so how is this going to help me today? I have an exam. I have a friend who just stopped talking to me. I have a parent who wants me to clean up the room, and I'm overwhelmed. So what good is it going to do me that I have this heritage?
Yeah.
You're building that connection.
So that's the whole, honestly, Sarah, that's the whole goal of Chabad. Chachma, Bina, and Das is bringing that intellectual the journey of your intellect, your mind, and your emotions into your relationship with Torah and with God and with Judaism. That's the goal. It's about, Tanya is about taking these deep, mystical, Kabbalistic ideas and applying it into my day-to-day life, my Tuesday, when nothing is going right. When I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I had a fight with my husband, my child's not listening, my house is a mess, I'm not feeling well. Yeah. Not that this has ever happened in any of our homes, but.
Feel free to say that, the decades of psychologists, and it's just decades because psychology is barely 100 years old, decades of psychology, the principles bear out what comes up from the Torah and from Tanya. In fact, most psychologists, the vast majority of psychologists were Jewish, whether they knew it or not or acknowledged it.
Yeah, there's actually fascinating discussions between Sigmund Freud and the Rebbe Rashab, between the current Rebbe and Viktor Frankl. There's a lot of fascinating.
So that explain, there's that kind of legitimacy there. But the more important thing even is that, all these kids are taking psychology these days. They go to the classes, they get all this theory and that information, that information. You can get overwhelmed with that too. And it's still not theirs. It's still not personal.
But Torah is theirs.
Belongs to them.
Yeah.
This is.
I agree. I love that point. I'm writing notes. I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, Tamara. Go ahead. Sorry. Hold on. Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to say that, Sarah, you're very correct, because I took a psychology course and it was related to Black lives. But there was a gentleman who was in the Corps, probably 6'2", very large man. And we had a conversation with him. He thought it was all bull, what the teacher was saying about Black Lives Matter. And this is years ago, before the Black Lives Matter movement. And this young kid who was white in the Corps and about 6'2", he couldn't see any relevance. And he thought, oh, it's just, you guys just made this up, and it's just, you want me to feel sorry for you and blah, blah, blah. And I was with another girl, and I was saying, I was asking him questions about, do you walk across the campus at night alone? Do you ever worry about in the evenings who's around you? Do you walk, across the grass, or do you stay to the sidewalks? The point was, I explained to him that I'm a female, and this woman next to me was a female. And we as females are very aware of our surroundings because we have to be. Yeah. Whereas he, being a male, was totally oblivious to the same. He's white, I'm white. We both should be concerned about muggings and, being attacked and everything. But because he's white and he's big and he's male, he didn't feel those were appropriate. They were applied to him. And so we were just explaining to him that these are what our realities are. And you're on this campus, that you should be more aware of your surroundings as well. But these are ours as females. And it's very much related to what Sarah was saying about what's ours, what's, and being aware of what's been given to us and what we should do about it.
So I also think that, thank you, Tamara. I love how you connect those ideas to your own experiences. It's great because that's how we can learn and we can tie it into our own, whatever we've been through, and God willing, then we can, what we're going to go through. So I also want to just say that that's one of the reasons we constantly revisit the Torah portion of the Torah story. You go to Hebrew school, I heard the story of this guy again. No, every single year, every single parsha comes back up again. It's not because we're bored and we have nothing else. There's so much else to study. It's because we're supposed to always be realigning with the core ideas. So what we're going to do, and this may take 2 parts, and that's okay because this is a process and this is a journey. What we're going to do is I want to discuss 6 different characters in the Torah. 5 different characters in the Torah, and what are a little bit of their story, and if we examine what are practical takeaways for our lives. Okay. So we'll start with Abraham just because his life was less than ideal, clearly. We know the Torah discusses that he had 10 challenges that God, oops, I definitely thought I silenced my phone. Sorry. Can one of you, Laser? Okay. Sorry about that. No, it's okay. I'll call her later. So sorry about that. I thought I silenced it. So we know that Abraham had a really rough life. We meet him when he's about 70, I think, maybe 72, 75, in his 70s. But we know the Midrash describes all the challenges he had beforehand. He himself was born into a family that, worshiped idols. His father was Nimrod's top general. And his father actually turned on him because he was a threat to the family. He was a threat to polytheism. And his father actually banished him, was actually happily going to, not, kill him or whatever it was, but his father turned on him. He himself ran away. His mother saved him. There's actually an incredible kids video, if you ever want to show your children or grandchildren, really well done, really well animated, called Young Avraham. And it's according to all the, authenticated, all the midrashic thoughts. And it's all about Avram's life beforehand. Very, very well done. I'll send you the name.
Please. Yes, please.
Absolutely. And Avraham's life was not simple. We know that he was a trailblazer who had this crazy idea. The whole world didn't agree with him. We know that he lived through 2 famines, not just 1, but 2. We know Nimrod tried to throw him in a fiery furnace. There's crazy, his life was not simple, okay? We also know that he suffered from childlessness, right? For many, many, many years. We know that his wife Sarah was kidnapped twice. I mean, not kidnapped. I don't know if you call it kidnap, but what do you call an adult? Not kidnap.
It's still called kidnap.
Okay.
She
was kidnapped twice by 2 kings, right? We know by Avimelech, the Philistine king. We know by Pharaoh, the Egyptian king. And yet with all the unwavering chaos in his own person, each one of those, he could have his own pity party. Just being someone who's in a happy marriage who can have children for years and years and years, that is a big stressor. Just coming from a family where you think differently and they don't accept you and your father rejects you, just having the king of the world want to assassinate you. There's a lot of reasons for Abraham to be pretty miserable, okay? And yet, what do we see? Characteristic of Abraham's life is we see that number 1, he was steadfast to his values. His core values that were so essential to him of there being one God. He didn't budge, right? In a sense that it was a truth. And not only did he live it, but he also wanted others to benefit from it. How do we know this? We actually know this because what kind of home did he have? It says that him and Sarah established their home, their Eshel, their tent, Eshel Achia, Shtia, and Lina, a place for eating, sleeping, and drinking, and sleeping. Their tent, their famous 4-door tent, stationed in a location where everyone traveled so that they can be hospitable. and they can be givers, and they can have hachnasat orchim. Actually, the Torah talks about that we learn the value of Jewish hospitality from Abraham. Interestingly enough, another character trait it says that we develop from Abraham is that Abraham was personified chesed, the character trait of loving and being a loving, giving person. So not only did they set up their life in a way strategically that they could be givers, but they didn't allow that challenge to define like, well, I'm too busy being miserable, I can't help. And I remember once I had a student, she came to me, her boyfriend, she loves her boyfriend, they're in a great relationship, whatever, Jewish Aggie couple, they're going to be getting married shortly, which is wonderful. It's probably one of our biggest nachas is all the couples that meet and thank God. And she tells me she has a big problem. I said, what's the problem? She doesn't know what to do. Her boyfriend's good friend is really down, really depressed. She says, my boyfriend is spending a lot of time helping him. I said, okay, that's so nice. What's the problem? She said, the problem is my boyfriend's also really like a little stressed out and down and a little sad and a little depressed, but like whatever. I feel like he shouldn't be giving right now. He needs to like stop and take. And I was like, no. Your boyfriend is doing exactly what Hashem wants him to do. Being a giver is probably the healthiest thing he could do right now. Helping his friend out. And then part of what we did, the MHFA training, the mental health first aid training, was to help students become givers in this specific area. Because we often underestimate the power of being a giver and being that source of light for others. And I remember when Sophie passed away, and my family was super close to Sophie. She taught my kids every day. She was literally my right hand. She was my personal assistant. We were involved in so many mitzvot together, right? And I will not forget that I got a phone call from someone in town, a very well-meaning, loving friend who said, Manya, are you taking care of yourself this week? I was like, what? She's like, you need lots of me time. Self-care. Take a bubble bath, get a massage. I'm like, literally, we're in a triage tent of emotional and psychological struggles right now. Like that's not self-care. Right now, my version of self-care is making sure that I am giving first aid and CPR to those who are walking in the door. Making sure that there were students who weren't eating, who weren't sleeping, who were scared to be alone, who needed to go find a psychologist or psychiatrist ASAP. There was a full-on crisis. And it was so striking to me, while this person was so well-intended, I know they were thinking about me, which was amazing. That wasn't the time. So we have to know from Abraham the value of being a giver, and also staying that no matter what is waving outside, no matter which way the wind is blowing, my core values are my core values. And I think that we underestimate often those two. We really underestimate them because it's easy to get swept up in whatever's trending or whatever the hashtags are or whatever the media is telling us or whatever political party you buy into, whatever Kool-Aid they're pouring down the pike for everyone to buy. Like it's so, or even the news. I was speaking to a girl, she says, I got off of Facebook. I said, why? She said, the amount of anti-Semitism, the amount of negative news. I said, good for you. Like it's so easy to get swept up in all these opinions and all these ideas. And you have to understand that Avram was the one person in the entire world who had that perspective at that time. And what he did was use that to transform the world. And you and I are still here. And do you know that when a young couple, why do they get married under a chuppah? A canopy with 4 things. Okay, it's not just for aesthetics. For thousands of years, that's our tradition. Why? Because we're reminding this young couple that thousands of years ago, God promised Abraham his children will be as many as the stars in the sky, the sand in the earth, and that you and I are actually a continuity of that promise. You and I come from a long line, and this young couple, while it may seem like, oh, this is their happiest day of their life, they have to remember that they're building a home amongst the Jewish nation, a home that needs to resemble and model the values of Abraham and Sarah, right? a home that should be warm and welcoming and open, a home of values that are unwavering. And we're actually sending a message to a couple. And this is one of the ideas that Yessie and I share with our couples, our Aggies, that when they're getting married, it's not just about you. You are literally a proof of that promise that God made to Abraham 4,000 years ago. And that's a really powerful message. That's a really powerful takeaway. So from Abraham, we got to remember these lessons about being a giver, about staying true to our values, and about remembering where we come from. Remembering where we come from. Okay? So I'm just adding this in. Any thoughts so far?
Nope. Who's next?
Who's next? One of my faves, Rebecca. And I actually know we said during the semester we're going to start with biblical women, and we're going to cover Rebecca in depth. So today we're doing an overview, okay? The overview of Rebecca's life, very well known. She was really from a bad home. Like, you know, talk about a street kid, her home, her family, her father, her brother, corruption all around. Talk about being raised by no good nicks. She was raised by no good nicks. And we also know that you know, her traumatic experience of, you know, choosing to leave her home, recognizing the influences around her were not healthy for her, you know, being aware of how she, you know, oh, this is a better option for me, and making a choice in her life. Her father was no good, you know, a swindler. Her brother, definitely issues at home. We know that she gets married, and we also know that she suffers from infertility for many, many years. It actually describes that she, you know, her prayer to Hashem, and she couldn't have children. And then when she does have children, what happens? What is Rebecca's children? Sibling rivalry, massive sibling rivalry, right? She has Jacob, she has Esau, she has children it's not easy raising the kids, right? And yet what's so interesting about Rivka is that when you look at how the Torah describes her, Rashi describes her. I'm going to actually just read the pasuk because I don't want to mess up on this. Okay. What do we learn from Rivka? Rashi describes her as a rose amongst thorns. She was raised in a thorn bush, but she was that rose. Beauty amongst thorns. And what do we see about Rivka's character very, very early in life? Very, very early in life, we see that what happens is that Eliezer, who is Abraham's top assistant, Abraham's getting old. His son, you know, Yitzchak. Yitzchak needs to get married, and he's saying he needs someone to find a wife for his son, and he sends the first shadchan out. He says, Eliezer, I need you to go find a girl. Eliezer's like, sure, no big deal. This is only the person who's going to continue the entire Jewish nation, right? No big deal. I got this. As a matter of fact, no, Eliezer's like, help. And he turns to Hashem, and we all know Hashem, he comes up with a sign of a way to know who's the right girl. What do we know about Rivka? So the story is told that when Eliezer shows up at this town where Rivka lived, where did people go? No different. They went to go get a nice drink, a nice, you know, meal. No different than the current coffee, you know, the coffee stand or the water stand or the coffee bar, or, you know, the local place to eat or meet people. So he goes to the well of ancient times, and he's like, you know, he needs hydration. So he turns to, he goes to the well to get a drink. Okay. And he shows up, he's exhausted. He's just traveled. He has camels with him. And what does Rivka say? Drink, and I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she watered the camels. What kind of man lets a young girl? He had to see her character. Remember who Sarah and Abraham were? This young woman had to continue that whole lineage and that identity and that value system. What was her character trait? Chesed, kindness, being intuitive to someone else's needs. You could have gotten away with just giving him a drink. That would have been very nice of her. But it actually describes how she did not stop until all the camels had what to drink. So from Rivka, we learn about the necessity to have moral clarity despite your home or your family or upbringing. Okay, those are not easy things to, they're easy to say. They're not easy to live and do. And that's why we review this all the time, right? That's why we learn these stories all the time, every year. And we also learn how, despite our circumstances, our familiar circumstances, we can still shine as a rose. We also learn that when we're doing something for someone, to really see their need. And we also learn that we see later, as she struggled with infertility, she didn't just be like, okay, fine, that's my reality. She actually turned to Hashem. And she died. Go for it.
As you're saying this, it strikes me that one of the really important aspects that you might want to keep in mind is to help these young people, or any of us, see of this array of ancestors, who do we relate to?
Oh, that's excellent.
A role model.
Yeah.
Because, as you were saying, she comes from this family. There are going to be people who are in your audience who come from that kind of family. Yeah. Now, it doesn't speak to me. My family had other problems, but that was not their problem. They had
Our families all have problems.
Yeah.
That's how Hashem made it. Hold on. Can you hold on 1 second? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's really empowering to identify a personal role model, especially for people who haven't had them. And I'm thinking that I had a client a while back who was a woman at that point in her 40s and 50s. I saw her for a long, long time. She came from a horrendous family. And what I ended up doing was helping her using hypnosis and imagery, just connecting with some, I made it up, some anonymous ancestor that it seemed like her family ancestry might have had Native Americans in them. So there was somebody she could draw strength from.
Right. So, what's interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that, because there was, my friend had recently done a workshop, and one of the stories she told in it was amazing. She told about this girl, and it's a very long story. I'm going to keep it pretty short. This girl who was raised in a very bad family, very bad home, turned to drugs, turned to everything, like really not like, just like life at its lowest point, ends up in prison, really not doing well. But through her time in prison, rehabilitation, she serves her time, and she gets out and she says, I got to redefine the story. The story is not over. I can't just allow the past 30 years or whatever it is to define me. And she works really hard, and she goes to, starts off in community college and starts off in school and climbs the ladders, ends up in an Ivy League school, writes a book about her experiences. And now, and it's all about this idea. And now the prison that she was in was looking, she went back there basically they were opening a new library, and the whole goal of this library was education. And, so they asked her, they said, look, you've been here, you walked down this road, you're an advocate for how we can transform our lives. Please, by all means, can you come to the opening? Well, in the meantime, she says, yeah. And anyway, fine, this is in 6 months, bureaucracy. So it's scheduled for 6 months from now. In the meantime, she gets a horrible diagnosis of a very terminal illness. And she, as the date is approaching to show up, she's, battling this illness. And as the date comes to come to the prison, she's like, maybe I just shouldn't go. I'm not feeling so good. What do I have to say anyway? But then she decides, she's like, you know what? If my story can help someone, I'm going. I was there. I sat in that orange jumpsuit, So she shows up, and she starts to, they're honoring her, blah, but, here you were here, now you went to, I'm saying Harvard, but it wasn't Harvard, whatever, you made it in life. And she had this, beautiful speech that she had written over the months And now she's in a totally different mindset, right? Now her reality is totally different. And she gets up there and she's about to speak, and she literally takes a speech out of her pocket and throws it in the trash. And she says to the women gathered there, she said, right now, look at yourself. What do you see? And of course they look at themselves. What do they see? Whatever we all say about ourselves.
Women in jumpsuits.
Yeah. And she says, you see your jumpsuit. Maybe you see your past. Maybe you see your family that you came from. That's my story.
Maybe no hope.
Maybe you see no hope. Yeah. Maybe that's what you see. And I have to tell you, having spent time in the federal prison with women teaching, it's not a place that seems very hopeful. It's not. But she says, but I want to tell you something else. You're actually not, it's not about the jumpsuit, and it's not about your past. It's about what's in here. And she tells them about her diagnosis, that she is now a limited time to live. And she said, if I can give over one message to you, is the power of what goes on in here to redefine your story. And I think that one of the threads that we can see through all of these stories is this, like Rebecca could have just stopped at this is it, you know? Each of them could have, and we'll continue this journey together. I'm going to jump off because I teach in another half hour and I have to make sure people are fed. I told told Sarah in the beginning, I'm in the middle of a program for over 200 Chabad girls, and 5 classes a day. And so my class starts shortly. But it's a really important idea that we shouldn't allow, we can allow it, but we shouldn't allow. We can try to go beyond all those things that define us in our head. You know, sometimes it could be our own physical self that we think that's what defines us, or our family, or our like marriages, but there's more to get beyond. And I think that the more we learn from these characters, the more there's what to draw into our lives. And Sarah, I loved your idea of, I really loved your idea of having the students think of what they resonate with, you know, what resonates with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an array of characters.
Yes. And each one has some similar threads, but each one in such a unique way. Next week, we'll cover Joseph and Miriam, and we'll wrap it up. They're also amazing. Each one's so amazing. I know. I say this, I get excited about these things.
Very quickly, Sarah, your talk tomorrow is at 12:30 as well.
Yes.
And on the same Zoom link, or where?
Zoom link.
Same one?